morning. Welcome to Polyphony Music Resources' first Zoom session of 2025 with our special guest, Dr. Monique Ingalls. Dr. Ingalls is Director of Research and Graduate Programs at the Dunn Center for Christian Music Studies at Baylor University in Waco, Texas. And Ingalls is also the author of numerous books and articles which focus on present-day congregational music making, addressing themes such as worship music in global Pentecostalism, online religious music practices, musical localization within world Christianities, and Black British gospel music. And she's also, interestingly, the co-founder of the biennial conference entitled Christian Congregational Music, Local and Global Perspectives. Today, Dr. Ingalls will be presenting on a different topic, but a timely topic at the beginning of a new year, as many of us typically start fresh with a list of New Year's resolutions, including personal goals and establishing new disciplines and habits. So the title of her presentation is How to Stop Running on Empty: Energy Management. Dr. Ingalls, welcome. We look forward to learning more about this topic from you today.
Thank you so much. And thank you for this invitation. It is it's a pleasure to be with you, to see old faces and new. And I want to say too, just to acknowledge at the beginning that, this is, every time I give, talks like this, I'm preaching to myself. Yeah, as well. I'm drawing both from the things that that I have learned and am learning about this topic, but as I was speaking to Kyle and Ryan ahead of time, I keep seeing things that I'm like, oh, I should integrate this next time. So I might spend a bit of the Q&A telling you about a couple of new resources that I've found. But so just to start our conversation together, I have a slideshow for those of you that are visual and like the slides. But just starting out, I'm going to let's see, if you haven't already, if you would please turn your view to gallery so that you can see everyone else involved. I'd like to start out by writing on the virtual board, so the chat, using the chat feature. And I would love to hear, first off, if everybody could just write in the chat what's one thing, we'll do two of these, but I want to hear first, what's one thing that you can rely on to give you energy? So we'll do energy givers, and then we'll do energy takers in a moment. But just think about that for a second and put it in the chat. What's something that gives you energy? Mm. Wow, we have a strong theme emerging here. This is fun. So let's see here. So we've got a lot of nature. I'm noticing. So looking here, we've got hiking in beautiful places, time alone in the wilderness, walks in nature, parks, hiking, etc. And Paula, I appreciate new projects. Me too. I love starting things, and planning things gives me energy too. I see a couple of family related and children related things. So time with grandsons for me. I have two elementary age daughters that I enjoy. The walking and talking, so kind of the nature, and the social, getting those in together. So so this is great, and feel free to add anything as it comes to mind. But now I want you to think about what is an energy depleter? What's something that, however, it doesn't necessarily have to be a negative thing. We know that there are a lot of very worthwhile endeavors that nonetheless are really depleting of our energy. So put that in the chat next. Hmm. Yeah, these are great. We've got, I noticed, I'll say Tracy was first off the bat with this, and I concur, those household chores that it's necessary. We've got to, things fall apart when we don't spend enough time on these things, but they're still depleting. Ryan says having a large task list, yeah, that needs to be accomplished. Yeah, staring at an overwhelming list and the sense of things are adding to it faster than you're ticking them off, that can be a real energy drain. Yeah, administrative chores, traffic. For me, grading. Grading is I tell my students this too. I'm just like, this is the least favorite part of my job. I've over the years, I'm trying to come up with creative assignments that I hate less than some of the more typical academic assignments. But Grant says not enough time to recharge as an introvert. Yes, absolutely. It can be difficult, especially during certain seasons of the year. I know December is a lot of times not so friendly a season for introverts when you've got performances and presentations and concerts and extra rehearsals and all of these things that require a lot of social energy. Yeah, Tracy says she seconds that. Yes. Ooh. Doug put down say a good one here. Frustration when collaborating and others fail to meet expectations or critical deadlines. Yes. I'll say other people can be a drain in those situations. And similarly, I'll say Paulo agrees, dealing with difficult people. Yeah. And so these are I think it's interesting. There's not a lot of overlap between the two, between the two of these. But one thing that I want to, a couple of things to bring up is that energy givers and takers are profoundly personal. So some people feel more restored. Say when I know we've got a hiking, outdoorsy bunch, there might be others that just like I just want to hole up and read a book for 3 days. So some things that energize some people may deplete others. So for instance, introverts and extroverts, and the way that people can give and take energy. But I think some of these things we've also seen certain things that are broadly shared. And what I hope is that this seminar is will be kind of a toolbox of both conceptual models, the why this works, why certain things deplete our energy or give us energy, mixed with practical suggestions that hopefully you all can take into your ministry contexts here in the new year. So, and I realize too is that as a learner and as someone who is still trying to put into practice a lot of these things, you all may already own some of these tools in the toolbox and may be very proficient at using them. Others you may kind of know about intellectually, but need some encouragement to put them into practice. So that is what I hope to be able to offer you all this morning. So I'm going to share my screen. We'll look at some slides. So how to stop running on empty. And I want to acknowledge at the very beginning, and some, if you're one of those that that gets energy from the reading of books on these topics. I've got lots of reading suggestions throughout. You can consider, in some ways, this presentation a distillation, synthesis, and the too long didn't read for a lot of these different sources. So the first book that I put on here, Daniel Pink, When the Scientific Secrets of Perfect Timing. This was, in some ways, this was what helped me at the beginning of my journey to start thinking about energy management. Notice that this session isn't called time management. Time and energy, as we'll see, are certainly related. But as we know, and as we'll see, time, energy in some ways has this, we don't have the same energy levels at all times. So a lot of the time management advice, I find some of the suggestions fall flat because they assume, some of the models assume humans as robots of, just any time is the same as any other. You want to get more done, get up at 4 a.m. Well, 4 a.m. might not be the best time for you. So anyway, that's one of those. Others that I would suggest, Cal Newport's Slow Productivity, which is, Cal Newport is an academic author, so he's writing, from the perspective of a college professor and a researcher, but really so many of these tools are useful across disciplines and occupations. Towards the end of the presentation, I'll be drawing heavily from Dr. Sandra Dalton-Smith's Sacred Rest. She has a wonderful typology of kinds of rest that everyone needs. And then finally, there is the power of fun. So just in case, if any of you are like me, is just like, what is fun and how do I start having more of it? This is a wonderful book with a lot of practical suggestions, things that your 5-year-old knows already, but that we forget, over the course of the life cycle. So, first off, so this is the kind of the broad overview to stop running on empty. So here are the 4 suggestions that will be backed up and explained in more detail. One of them, the first thing I think we need to do is to change our perspective on time. So rethink time. Secondly, embrace seasonality. I'm glad to see within kind of the popular cultural discourse about self-care and about resting, it's really great to see so many good sources now realizing, oh, it's not linear, it's cyclical, and we all have these seasons that it needs to be, that we need to give ourselves permission to be less productive, to rest, to winter, to let things, the transformation go on inside without a lot of the external, kind of things to show for it. So the third thing, know your energy needs, and I'll give you some wonderful diagnostic tools for you to do that, and then learn how to rest, and that's where we'll come back to Dr. Dalton Smith's typology. So the first thing on the list is rethink time, and I've chosen a, hopefully not taken too horribly out of context, I've chosen a verse of scripture to frame each of these sessions or each of these sections of the presentation. So, this the famous verse in the Psalms that says, "For you, God, 1,000 years are as a passing day, as brief as a few night hours." So scripture tells us, not just here, but in several other places as well, that God experiences time differently than we do. God created time. Yes, Jesus, through his incarnation, chose to be, that was one of the things that he emptied himself of. He has experienced time as a human being. But God, it created time, and so is outside of it. He stepped into it in the person of Jesus Christ, so he gets it from both the omniscient perspective and the embodied one. And I would love to, I think as a kind of as a tongue in cheek, have you ever heard of time management? If you do a Google search on that, there are umpteen thousand million sites that you could go to help you with your time. And I got to thinking about all of these, as I've already mentioned kind of one criticism that I have of a lot of time management is just assuming that every hour of the day is the same and somehow you can get up at 4 a.m. and do the same kinds of things that you might be able to do at 10 a.m. or 4 p.m., or 10 p.m. But anyway, thinking about time management, I think that it would be I've always thought it would be fun to do I don't know if any of you have ever done a teachings of Jesus on time management. So that's one idea for a next seminar. So some of the things might be observe the Sabbath every week, no exceptions. Take time to rest, even when it's inconvenient for other people and they die in the meantime, and you have to bring them back to life. Choose the worst possible moment to delay your arrival. So I'm pretty sure none of us probably measure up to Jesus when it comes to time management, but maybe we should start practicing some of these things. But I want to propose to you that the way that we think about time is not actually true to any of our experience, right? So here's a weekly schedule, just a template, something that you might find on Google Calendar or whatever else. And you'll notice that all of the hours in this lovely schedule are exactly the same size. They look the same. 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. looks exactly the same as 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. I don't know about you all, but I can tell you experientially, there is a vast difference between my experience of those 2 hours of the day, even though they look the same on the schedule. So I propose that that we hold on just a second. I need to move this off so that I can see my screen. Oftentimes how we think of our time, notice there's an asterisk on we, and I've put, this is an actual term that social scientists use, WEIRD, the acronym WEIRD, for Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. There are a lot of studies that critique psychological science because so many of the psychological experiments are done on these people. So, who are the easiest people to experiment on? College students, people who are in higher education, who need money, et cetera. And so I'm putting a we here. I mean, there may be exceptions to this rule. Maybe some of us are less weird than others, but I'm making a blanket generalization here for people who generally fit these categories. So how do we think of our time? Often we think of it as linear. So, a calendar, a timeline, something that doesn't have a lot of variation and that every moment is a new one along the timeline. We think of it as bounded. Again, our time as, perhaps divided into these little blocks, like on the calendar, something that kind of neatly divides into these discrete units. We think of it as evenly spaced. Again, going to the calendar, every day kind of has the same. This looks like it has the same weight and the same amount of time in it. Importantly, a lot of times we run around with time scarcity, right? We think of our time as being limited. I think very few of us have an abundance mindset when it comes to our time. So I want to suggest to you that this picture is really a lot closer to how most of us experience time. So notice that it's a grid that has been placed in 3 dimensions, and some of the grid, over here, some of it is stretched out. Some of the squares you can barely see because they are, because they're warped and kind of go into one another. And so, in theory, again, here's a theory, we all have the same amount of time, but we experience it very differently. The time flies when you're having fun. We'll get to that later. Sometimes it's where you are in the life cycle. Don't know if any of you with kids or grandkids or nieces or nephews have noticed just how long it takes to get to Christmas when you were a child, or to your next birthday. They take forever to come. Whereas, I don't know about you, I'm just like, wow, how am I halfway to my next birthday already? It also depends, how we experience time depends on how much stuff we're doing or not doing at the time. And then, importantly, for the sake of this presentation, how much energy we have at a given moment profoundly influences our sense of the passing of time. So, how energy works, why we sometimes have more of it and why sometimes we have less of it, really isn't all that mysterious. Scientists of all stripes have been studying how the human body uses and creates energy for years, and they have called attention to something that God put in place from the beginning of creation, or eons ago, which brings us to point two. Oh, sorry. Let's see. Point two, which is to embrace seasonality. So the scripture verse to kind of frame this section: to everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under heaven, a time to be born, a time to die. We know intellectually say whether or not, again, we actually make time to experience this seasonality is another question. But a season is, just thinking about how we're defining season here. It's a period that's characterized by or associated with a particular activity or phenomenon. So going beyond certainly the natural seasons condition what kinds of activities we can do. I can't, even if I wanted to, I guess if I wanted to, I could join the polar bear club and go swimming right now, but that's not the season we're in, even way down south and in Texas. But so embracing seasonality. So that's kind of how one definition for seasons. A period within that is the interval of time required for a cyclic motion or phenomenon to complete a cycle and begin to repeat itself. And so we'll talk about in a minute different levels of periods that go into this cyclical seasonality, because our energy varies widely for all kinds of reasons throughout the day, the week, the month, the year, the decade, the time in the life cycle. We are rhythmic beings. Okay, so the creation is governed by these rhythmic cycles, whether you're talking about the seasons, the cycles of the moon, various cycles in the human body. I found it interesting to note that even a heartbeat, which we kind of think is on off, it's like beat, 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 beat. Even the heartbeat is the culmination of a rhythmic cycle. So there are so many things, within creation. We create rhythmic cycles on small, medium, and large scales. And moving forward just a little bit. One of the things that we find when we start thinking of things in terms of rhythmic cycles rather than relentless forward movement or some kind of growth trajectory is that, again, looking back to scripture, God models and mandates this rhythm of work and rest. We can think no further than God resting on the Sabbath day, the Sabbath being so important that it came in ahead of, thou shalt not kill, in the list of the 10 Commandments. So God models and mandates these rhythms, and I enjoy the icon over there on the side. This is an icon of Jesus taking time to rest on the boat, even when there is a storm raging all around him. So the church, as far as cycles, perhaps some of your churches, are on a cycle like this. Every church, it's just like churches that say, oh, we don't have a liturgy. Yes, you do. you don't call it that, right? But some of us who have embraced the word liturgy and everything that comes with that, the church has created cycles that help us grow, and some of these cycles are fallow, letting the ground lie fallow, reflective periods where there's less that's happening, not like the really busy eventful periods, but times that we lean into and have time to reflect on the things that are about to happen, or to put into practice the cycle of the story of Jesus within ordinary time. So here are some. This is a I have come to enjoy the cyclical calendar structure. So this is I would say a little bit goofy looking because I didn't have the aid of a compass. So bear with me here. Trying to get a sense of my family's calendar. Um, I have since discovered that there are online, you can buy cyclical calendars that will interface with Microsoft Outlook, with Google Calendar, etc. So if you want to look at your yearly ministry schedule in a circle, there are ways that you can do that, things that will import. I find this so helpful for orienting myself in time because the thing is that even though every year may be different, largely we've got the outer layer of which I've written, which the color coding is Texas temperatures. And so we can expect, I can look down there into July, August and know that I don't want to do anything outside, during that time, unless I want to drive to Colorado or, fly to England or, or whatever else. But then other cycles, my husband's a minister in the Episcopal tradition. And so our church life and his work life is governed by the liturgical calendar. And then in the middle, you've got the two school calendars. And so there is the elementary school calendar, and then the Baylor's school calendar, and then in the very middle, which I lacked the space to write on, is a kind of family events. So anyway, I have found this kind of exercise. If you're a visual person and enjoy different ways of seeing things, I'd strongly recommend to you either doing this freehand or finding one of those apps. In fact, I may have put it in the resources. If not, I can put a link. I can send you all a link to it. But I would challenge you related to this seasonality. Again, if you thought of your life in ministry, as well as your life, outside of ministry as a circle or a spiral, not a line, what patterns might you notice? What weekly, monthly, quarterly, or yearly rhythms might you create? Or what might you move if you, made something like this and you're like, oh dear, I didn't realize that, just seeing everything lined up this way, I don't need to schedule not one more thing in December because I am already, or there might be some surprises around the end of your kids' school year or in the summer. So I would suggest to you, this is an optional homework thought experiment, is to kind of take advantage of thinking of your life in these cyclical, circular, or spiral patterns. So anyway, completely optional homework. Make a circle calendar. Yes, I did include plandisc.com is the service, and this is one of the things that you can do. So you've got a teacher's calendar right here with school activities and then what goes on in their 8th grade and their 9th grade class that can really help them in planning to equalize, to make sure that they're not spending all of their energy all at one time. Again, like I said, and I should also say that I'm not being paid by any of the companies or the books. I'm getting no commissions off of any of this. It's just stuff that I found cool that I thought that you should know about. This is the one that integrates with Outlook, and it also includes a ready-made liturgical year calendar, so you can have that without even having to create it. So, moving on to the third point is know your energy needs. So Scripture tells us that each of us are fearfully and wonderfully made. And so what I take from that, or how I would apply that to our discussion about energy, is that it's helpful for all of us to have a more in-depth understanding of how our own unique energy pattern varies throughout the day. So trying to find not just, taking, some time management guru's advice for if you're going to get everything done, you're going to have to get up at 4 a.m. Maybe not. maybe you're not terribly, I am not terribly productive at 4 a.m. I've tried it, and maybe some of you have as well. And, so not every hour of the day is the same. recognizing that and working to find your best times of the day. And I want to start this discussion by saying, I really appreciated Kyle's admonition earlier, the judgment-free space. And I think we need to bring that, first and foremost into this discussion in saying, when we say, you are fearfully and wonderfully made, when it comes to your energy needs, what we're saying is, your energy needs are very different from mine and from anyone else's in this Zoom room or who's watching after this. And so not all hours of the day are equal for any one person. Some people are at their best at 7 a.m. Others are at their absolute worst. Something, my best hours, where I have the most energy might not be yours. And here's something I think that I'm still struggling, I'm on the journey to accept, but I might have fewer peak energy hours every day than you do. Or I might have more than you do. That's something that varies from person to person based on health, based on where we are in the life cycle. If any of you I have a 7-year-old with ADHD who I just wish I could tap that and inject it sometimes because, another thing that contributes to that is, each of us may have more or fewer peak hours. But another thing that that I have struggled through, myself, is that my sleep needs, I might need more sleep than you do, or maybe less sleep than you do. But I think the bottom line is that do not compare yourself to others when it comes to figuring out your energy needs, or to some imagined should. I should. There's these benchmark statistics of, American adults need 7 to 8 hours of sleep. Well, you could take from that, I only should need 7 hours of sleep per night. I am an 8.5 hour. I will come out with that through a lot of experimentation and journaling and, and other things. I've found that that's just the amount of sleep that I need to function. And I can do 7 hours for, periodically when I need to. But, your energy needs say absolutely nothing about your personal worth or value, and should, never be used as a means to shame someone or yourself or to feel any kind of moral superiority or inferiority. So, coming from this, therefore, for a number of, for decades, people who have had chronic illness, especially the unexplained kind, especially what we would now call invisible disabilities, were labeled with terms like lazy, or like they were faking it, for sympathy, when there were some genuine energy deficits that we're now, more well equipped to understand. There's a whole literature on this, in fact, that is really heartbreaking to read. And I can suggest a couple of the things that, I kind of read when researching this topic. There's one, just the title of the article is heartbreaking. It's I'm chronically ill and afraid of being lazy. And the author of this article, his name is Esme Waijun Wong, says, in a society that holds productivity as unequivocally good, to do less feels like a moral failing. So, as Christians, I want to affirm for us, that, again, our worth does not depend on our productivity. We are all created in the image of God and as dearly loved children of God. So I think one thing that the disability discourse, especially in the invisible disabilities, has helped with is understanding your energy needs. Some of you may have seen the spoon metaphor. I'm realizing that so I've gotten a little bit ahead of myself, but I'll go to spoons and come back to the other things. Not sure how many of you have heard this, but there is something called the spoon theory. And so it's a simple way of thinking about your energy capacity. And so if your energy was represented, they needed a unit. And so a unit of energy is a spoon. It could have been anything else. It could have been a fork, a knife, a cotton ball. But anyway, you only have a certain number of spoons that you can use every day. So the spoon, a single unit of energy, is a way of talking about capacity. And so the spoon theory, you can see this from Dysautonomia International. So limited energy. So doing too much in one day can leave you short on spoons the next day. And so there are some interesting thought experiments. If you only had 12 spoons a day, how would you use them? And then take away one spoon if you didn't sleep well, or forgot to take your medicine, or skipped a meal. Take away 4 spoons if you have a cold. I don't think that just to say, spoon theory is obviously very useful for those with chronic illness, but I think any of us, we all have a limited number of spoons every day. For most of us, it's considerably more than 12. But we all know that there are some things that really deplete our energy. Some of those are, would happen to anyone, like having a cold. Others are personal to us, like being an introvert and having stayed up late doing some kind of social event the night before. I don't know about you all, but I wake up with 2 fewer spoons, the day after something like that happens. So I think this is a really helpful model, and we'll come back to it in a minute after I'll say the few things that I skipped here in the beginning. I want to go back to what we talked about earlier with cycles. So again, much of the creation is governed by rhythm. As a musician, I love that. I mean, we are rhythmic beings. So many aspects of our body, from our heartbeat to the respiratory cycle to things on a larger scale, like the life cycle, happen in rhythm. And so here are some of our fundamental rhythms. Circadian rhythm, is one of the main ones I want to talk about when it comes to energy. Here are some of the other ones. Some of us have more, rhythms than others. But whatever kind of body you were born into, it's fundamentally rhythmic. And some key insights from one of the books that I mentioned, from When. What I think is interesting is that human energy use, there are both, universals and particulars. And so I want to explain to you some of the insights from Daniel Pink's work, is the near universal daily energy pattern that people have. But what's unique, to each individual is your own circadian rhythm within that. So kind of when in the day this daily energy pattern happens. So Pink, drawing from all kinds of, science that has been, experiments that have been done on more than just the weird population, right? So these are drawing from large multi-population cross-cultural studies. And something that Pink talks about is what he calls the hidden pattern of everyday life, a regular daily cycle in which our energy fluctuates, that all of us have a peak, a trough, and then periods kind of in the middle of either ramping up or recovering from. And before you look at this and say, oh, that's not me, I don't have a peak, a peak in the morning, we say, wait a moment, because we'll talk about morningness and eveningness and how this, varies by person. But what's universal about this is that every single person on earth does not have the same amount of energy at given times per day. So the calendar, going back to the beginning, where 7 to 8 a.m. looks exactly the same as noon to 1, looks the same as 4 to 5. None of us experience, energy is not parceled out in that way. So notice that there is for the trough, from peak to trough, there's a major drop, both in your mood and in your ability to perform certain tasks. After the trough, there's a rise in mood. And then I'm trying to see, my screen sharing, my icon is in the way. Hold on. I can't see my screen very well. Oops. Okay. The peak time is where we are the most highly vigilant. We're alert, we're awake. Think of this as when, the caffeine kicks in. Best mood, most amount of energy. So in finding our energy needs, then the goal is to try to figure out when these times happen. So to quote from Pink, we are smarter, faster, dimmer, slower, more creative, and less creative in some parts of the day than others. These daily fluctuations are more extreme than we realize. The performance change between the daily high point and your daily low point can be equivalent to the effect on performance of drinking the legal limit of alcohol. That was something that I read and thought, whoa, okay. So, and that's by day, the difference between, your individual peak and trough. So when you start thinking about those things, it can revolutionize, I think, the way that you plan your day. And so, a couple of funny cartoons to kind of bring this home. I've always enjoyed this one. I'll give you a minute to look at it. So some of you might be the really, really late bird that gets that worm at 4 a.m., 2 hours before the early bird gets up. I also enjoy this one. So unproductive pigeons in the room. Show of hands. I have always struggled with the early bird night owl distinction because I'm like, actually, I don't like getting up in the morning or staying up late. So what's wrong with me? I'll tell you, there's nothing wrong with me or with you if you feel like an unproductive pigeon, and I'll tell you why. So it has to do with chronotype. This is another thing that has received a lot more attention in popular sources kind of in the last decade. But how chronotype, Pink defines this as a personal pattern of circadian rhythms that influences our physiology and psychology. So daily energy cycles, this is some, again, from these large scientific studies. There are daily energy cycles. How the peak and trough works for each of us depends on your chronotype. And through thousands, possibly tens of thousands of the people that they've studied, what they have come up with is this designation of larks, what we might call there are morning larks, are morning people, owls, are late night people. But one of the things that they found is most of us are what Pink has called third birds. So 65% of us are kind of, morning leaning, and some are morning leaning, some are evening leaning, but they base this on the midpoint of sleep. So the advantages in that are it takes account of of the differences there. Of some people, thrive on 6 hours of sleep. Other people need 9 hours of sleep. So it doesn't matter how much sleep. It's like when is the optimal midpoint. So another bit of completely optional homework for you is there is that it's scientifically valid because of the terrible name. Only a scientist could have come up with a name this unmarketable for a test. So it's called the Auto MEQ, which stands for the Automated Morningness Eveningness Questionnaire. All right. So chronotype self-test info, if you are interested in finding out whether your daily whether you are an early bird, a night owl, or a third bird, you can take this test and it will score you on where you are. And I am a morning leaning intermediate. I don't have my score in front of me, but I think I'm like a 44 or a 45 on this scale. Anyway, I think it's a self-diagnostic that's super helpful in trying to figure out where your energy troughs and peaks are. So, back to Spoon's theory, which we talked about a minute ago. There are, I think that it's useful in so many respects, but two things that I don't like about Spoon theory, or that I would revise, that I would say this is great, but it could be even better. Again, one is the unintended implication that chronically ill people are the only ones with limits, and everyone else somehow has an unlimited number of spoons, which of course we know is not true. We all have an upper limit on the amount of energy that we can spend. And then The second thing is that it doesn't address, oh, yep. Forgot I had some, say, fun pictures here. I enjoy the, no spoons left, only knives. I really want that on a t-shirt. um, so we all have a limited number of spoons, but the other that this doesn't address is that it's actually possible to add spoons to the equation. It's possible to increase your spoons, to do things that give you more energy that you had before doing them. And so, for instance, just to give a for instance in my life, I'm writing a book right now. I have a weekly support group meeting with some colleagues on Zoom. And after our sessions, I want to work on my book. Like, I go away with more energy, with more drive. I come to this meeting with 3 spoons and I leave with 4. And I think those restorative activities, some of the things that I had us think about at the beginning of the session, how do you get more spoons in the middle of your day? Maybe you go outside and take a walk. If you're near a park, drive to a park and take a couple of laps around the park. Maybe it won't add spoons, but maybe at least it will keep the level from from going down as quickly as it has. So I'd like to talk about, let's see. I'm going to skip through this and let's see. Oh, the transition was, this is something also that you can do in your spare time. I realize that we are nearing the end of the session, and I want to be respectful of your time. I will kind of blaze through this last session, but I'm happy to provide these slides for you if you'd like to read through in more detail later. The fourth bit of advice for energy management is learn to rest. And some of us have to relearn this process or just increase. We all have a toolbox for techniques for rest, and we might just need to add some more things to that toolbox. Jesus says, as we know, this profoundly comforting verse, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Spiritual rest, the rest that only God can give, is absolutely, a crucial part of rest. But I found this typology, I think that is helpful. And you don't have to stand up, but at this point in the presentation, we've been sitting here a while, and I just want to give you, permission to, if you need to stretch. I don't know, I have been slouching, so probably need to remind myself to sit up straight, rest break, move your body in whatever ways you need to, and then we can come back to things. Okay, I feel better. Hope you do too. Rest is necessary. And again, this is a gem of a book. I highly recommend it if you've got some, time for reading, restorative, self-care reading planned for your week. This is a wonderful book to read. I'm going to give you the TLDR version of it. Is that Dr. Dalton Smith describes in this book 7 types of rest. So physical rest. This can include, the passive component, which is very important, is sleep. Okay, so we all do need, that's absolutely a foundation point, but the active component could include things like yoga, stretching, massage therapy. Physical rest is something that all of our bodies need. Mental rest. Okay, any of us who use our brains, a lot during the day, sometimes, symptoms of this might be, when you enter a room and are just like, why am I here? Why did I come into this room? Or if you lay down at night and your mind is so active and anxious and thinking about things, racing mind, this is a sign that you are in desperate need of some mental rest. And so scheduling breaks through the day to remember to pause or slow down or to engage in some of these other areas of rest is absolutely key. Creative rest. This is the rest that we experience when we appreciate beauty in any form. And going back to our beginning, interesting how many of us are just like nature, walks in nature, hikes, these kinds of things. This is profoundly replenishing. Also the effect of having art, in your home, something that can awaken your senses, and give you that kind of rest that you need. Sensory, emotional, social, and spiritual are the other kinds of rest here, and I think, like their names suggest, the one that I'll go into a little bit more detail on is sensory rest. And she talks about how in today's modern world, whether we're aware of it or not, we're constantly being stimulated. Our senses are. Phones are ringing. The TVs are on in the background. There's a quiet hum from the computer. The bright lights overhead are shining and buzzing. So sometimes experiencing a sensory rest deficit, we might feel energized, but we become more agitated and irritable as the day progresses, and we just don't know why. We're just like, am I crazy? Am I crazy? Those are some really helpful factors to look into. Are my senses being inundated? Am I constantly having to refocus my attention? So that's something that I found helpful, because sometimes it can be hard to diagnose. So stopping and reflecting, some other completely optional homework, for you to do after this session is over. And this is something that Dr. Dalton Smith suggests you do as you read the book, is, in which of the 7 are you feeling most rested? Take a moment to give thanks for that rest that you're experiencing. And then also think about, okay, which one of these am I feeling least rested? And then try to devise a specific way that you can meet that rest need in the next couple of weeks, because your body a lot of times is trying to tell you something. It's not crazy. When you are irritated and anxious, you feel like for no reason, it's probably a rest deficit. So try to do that. And if you want a quiz, there is a rest quiz for free. You don't have to buy the book, but restquiz.com. Dr. Dalton Smith has this, so you can figure out, or have this diagnostic tool to help you figure out what kind of rest that you might need. And then finally, have fun. I mentioned this fun book, and I thought it was interesting, to think of fun as a special kind of rest. Catherine Price argues that fun isn't just a result. We think of it as a result of thriving, but she says, no, it's a cause. Fun encourages engagement with the world. It invigorates and nourishes us. It brings us together. It reminds us of who we used to be. Again, that childlike sense that we get when we're having fun, but also who we want to be. Mm-hmm. So I've got some ingredients of fun I am going to skip through, because I realize that we're out of time. I want to respect your time, but just to review the things that we've talked about this morning. In managing your energy, rethink time. Don't think of your time as a calendar. Think of it as a bizarrely warped, if you have, sci-fi mindset, a black hole, something like that. Know your energy needs. Embrace seasonality, learn how to rest, and then make time for, rediscover those things that are fun for you. Yes, it may have changed since you were 5 years old, but some things may not have changed. I like to do messy art. I've realized that with my girls. I love to do elementary aged, projects. I don't do grown-up crafts. Give me glue and paper and scissors. That's kind of my speed. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing now. I hope that this was useful to you all. And again, I am happy to feel free to email me about anything, and I'll email Kyle and Ryan the slides from this presentation in case there are any of these quizzes that you want to go back and retake, or any of the things that I kind of skimmed over, because that happens when you're excited about and engaged in a topic, is that a lot of times I don't contain myself well to the I would say to the time period involved.
No,
But
no need to worry that we got a delayed start with the session this morning. Thank you for your time. And most of all, Dr. Ingalls, thank you for um, sharing all of your research and work on this. I've been reminded that one of your gifts, many gifts, or at least one I'm aware of after this session, is that you do a wonderful job being very thorough and reading and just all the research you pull together. So thank you for this session. This has been a good introduction. Yeah,
welcome.
I think all of us would love to have that material to continue to
Okay.
digest. And the other thing, last thing I'll say before closing is I was just thinking about, the things we did in kindergarten. There was a nap time, there was recess, and then there was time to learn. And there's a preschool at our church, and some of you probably have a preschool, some day program, something that is going on. And sometimes I thought I should just go outside and play with the kids, or when they're having nap time, maybe we should, as a staff, have a little break. Like we can learn something from the
That's an amazing
preschool kids
idea.
down the hall in the church.
Mm-hmm.
So thank
I
you
got in
for all.
trouble for being too aggressive with tag. I kept
That's
winning,
right.
pushing all the kids down. You know.
um, so anyway, I'll close with a benediction that our good friend, for several of us, mentor, professor, or a colleague, retired colleague, Terry York, has written for church musicians, a benediction for the church musicians that um, continues just to feel timely. And now to you who've been called to sing amid the shouts and the cries and slogans, to you who've been called to sing love to hearts full of hate, sing truth in the cacophony of falsehood, to sing community in the barren places of isolation, to sing peace in the midst of deadly conflict, to sing embrace in the midst of denial. To you, musicians of the Song of Grace, may God grant always yet another song of courage to be hummed until God's words appear at the time of testing. Amen. Thank you, friends. Breathe, bless, and be well this day. Bye.
Thank you all. Good to see you.